I just thought you were really cute.
Oh,
I had to say
you.
hi.
Hi,
Nice to meet you. Feel
Would you
bad for
like
your
a
phone.
Snapchat or something?
Kidding.
I'll take your number.
Sure. But I just wanted an excuse to say I thought you were cute.
Oh, thanks. You're so.
Yeah.
I'm like super sick, so that was super nice to say.
Yeah.
If you want, I can give you my number.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
No, I don't look like it, but I'm pretty innocent.
Yeah, okay. You think you don't look innocent, which is interesting to me. You think you look non-innocent.
I don't know.
Interesting. Well, I guess
All right,
we'll find out.
Just shoot me a text.
Yeah.
Whenever.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks
Bye.
for coming up to me.
Would you like to get coffee sometime?
Sure.
Sure. What are you doing? When are you free this week? Interesting shoes, by the way.
Interesting good or interesting
I don't know if I've
bad?
ever seen someone with Crocs during the day.
I wear them all the time.
Just interesting.
They're
I'll take that as a good, unless
have
you
two
want to be
pairs.
boring. You have how many pairs?
two.
Two. I thought you said 10. I was like,
Oh no.
oh, that's like crazy cat lady for shoes if you have 10.
They're awesome. Get a pair.
So when are you free this week?
Not Tuesday and not Thursday.
Okay, so maybe Friday?
Sure.
This is the complete guide to Daygame. So this is going to be everything you need to know to meet, approach, and attract women in the day. Now, Daygame, I think, is largely underrated. A lot of people don't think that there's a lot of potential with Daygame, that you can get good results with Daygame, and that simply isn't true. Realistically, even if your looks, money, status isn't very good, even if you're not the best looking guy, even if your social skills aren't the best, from Daygame, you could realistically get multiple dates with attractive women every single time that you go out and approach women during the day. Every single time. And this is something I've seen a lot of different guys do, guys I've coached who fit into every archetype, short, balding guys who are not good looking by society standards and who don't have social skills. And part of the reason for this is that if you meet women in a nightclub, there is a lot of competition. And when I mean a lot. There is a significant amount of competition. That girl you approached has probably been approached by 10 to 20 other guys in an entire night. But if you go to a college campus, if you go to, let's say, a park or a mall, you can approach a girl and no one else has approached her in weeks, if not months, in a daytime environment. So you stand out from all the competition immediately. And just that alone can be enough to get a girl to go on a date with you. It's just a memory for her to have a guy approach her during the day and to say something confident like, hey, I thought you were cute and I had to meet you. That is a memory for her. And that alone, if you do it enough times, will lead you to get dates consistently. Whereas in night game, to get results, if you get a bunch of girls' numbers, they're a lot more likely to be flaky because these girls are being approached by so many other guys that same night that they're only likely to actually go on a date with the one or two that stood out the most. So Daygame it has less competition. And that's one of the biggest benefits to it. I'm not saying it's better than night game, but it is underrated in terms of the kind of possibilities that you can get, the kind of results that you can get. So when it comes to Daygame, the first thing you need to think about is location. Where are you going to do Daygame? Obviously, this whole pandemic situation changes things. Right now, university campuses aren't really an option, and they're usually the best option. However, there still are places like Target, there still are places like shopping malls, there still are places like parks. I'm in New Orleans, and there's a park less than a mile from where I'm staying that has hundreds and hundreds of attractive women that you can approach even during this pandemic. And in a lot of ways, approaching right now is easier because there's even less competition than normal. But as a general rule of thumb, what's the best place to approach during Daygame? A university campus if you are in the right age group and if you are available in the right hours. That's number one, the best place. After that, the second best place would be a mall. Generally, malls are the second best place. They're not nearly as good as university campuses in terms of the sheer number of women who are just doing nothing, but there's still going to be a decent number of girls that you can find at a mall. It's pretty good. And then after that, it really depends on your city. If you have a city with beaches, that's really good. If you live in a city with busy streets where there's just a lot of people traffic, that's also good. And then if you live in a city with parks or say public hiking trails where there's a lot of foot traffic, that's also a really good place to approach women. And right now in a lot of cities during the pandemic, parks are going to be the best, or even a place like a Target is going to be the best. So there is one thing a lot of people say, that when it comes to day game, you should just, go about your daily life. And when you see a hot girl, approach her. Don't do day game. That's creepy. Doing day game as like a hobby, that's fucking weird. I get what they're saying. I get how it's a very romantic idea that you can just, you see a hot girl on your day and you approach her, and it's just like this magical, that is cool if that happens. The problem is, be realistic to yourself. How many hot girls have you seen in the last several months just going through your day? Probably a decent number. How many times did you actually approach those girls? How many times? The answer is probably 0. So the thing is, we all have a certain amount of approach anxiety. We have a resistance to approaching. We have a habit over years of just not approaching hot girls we see, that if you want to start getting results, you have to break that habit. You have to change the wiring in your brain to, instead of thinking, there's a hot girl, I shouldn't approach her, to there's a hot girl, my instinct says approach her. Until it becomes a habit for you to approach the girls you see that you're attracted to, then you can't just do a day game as a part of your lifestyle, because it's not going to happen. You're not going to approach those girls. It sounds like a romantic notion, but if it hasn't worked in the past, it's not going to work in the future. And anything that makes getting results easier, anything that makes it sound like you can avoid doing the hard work, is probably a magic pill. It's probably magic pill kind of thinking. So yes, eventually you can get to a point where whenever you see a hot girl, you can just approach her. But if you haven't been doing that up to this point in your life, you have to build the foundational habit of being able to approach by doing focused day game sessions. Anyone who gets good at anything does focused practice. They specifically work on that skill. They set aside a certain amount of time and just hammer it. And that is what works. That is 100%, that is the strategy that works. So, what I would recommend, if you're new to day game, you're considering doing day game, is to make a plan that is realistic to your schedule to go out, say 2, 3, 4 times a week, at least 30 minutes. So if you want to get results from day game, you have to make it a habit. You have to make it something that you do with a certain amount of discipline. So it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week, 30 minutes a day. And then you build on it over time. Just like if you were starting a new workout at the gym, you start small and you build it up over time. So start with something that's realistic, like just, I'm gonna go out 30 minutes, 3 times a week and do as many approaches as I can, and then build that up over time. But you have to start somewhere. And if you're not doing any approaches now, it's probably because the idea of approaching that you have in your head is too much. You're asking too much of yourself. You're telling yourself, well, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna do 5 approaches, and I'm gonna get every one of their numbers. That's what you think, that's what your expectation is for your first day game session. And that's just not a realistic expectation. So start with something small and then build on that over time. If you're unable to do approaches when you first go out, that's okay. Just keep pushing yourself, keep doing these 30-minute sessions until you get so fed up with yourself that you start approaching. That's the only way to really get over approach anxiety. It's just to keep throwing yourself out there until eventually you're like, fuck this. This is so fucked. I hate this. Like, I hate not approaching, and you finally take action. That's the only way to make that shift. So keep doing that, and then when you're able to do an approach, then you build it up to, say, do 3 approaches, build it up to do 5 approaches. I go more into detail about how to structure this in my book, The Method, or my online course, The 5 Pillars of Game. There's a 12-week action plan. I'm not gonna go into every little detail because that would take an hour in itself, but that's the overall structure. Start small, build it up, and increase your measurable goals over time. At first, it might be to go out 30 minutes, then it might be to go out and do at least 1 approach, then it might be to go out and ask at least 1 girl for her number, etc., etc. That's the general trajectory that you want to take. If you want more details, look at my online course, the5pillarsofgame.com. But anyway, so that's the first step, and let me look at my notes. The second step is to make a decision about whether you should go direct or indirect. Now, both have pros and cons, but when it comes to day game, direct is a lot more effective than it is in night game. And there's a few reasons why. In night game, any girl you approach is going to assume that you're hitting on her. If you're in a club, she knows every guy that talks to her is probably hitting on her. That's the context of the interaction that's assumed. So if you go and tell her she's hot, you're telling her something she already knows, and you're putting yourself into the category of all these other loser guys that are approaching her. So it can actually backfire to be direct unless your sub-communications are just really, really on point, which, I mean, your nonverbal communication, like your eye contact, your vocal tonality, etc. It can actually backfire. Now, when it comes to day game, it's very different. What does a girl think is happening if you approach her in the day? She thinks that you are probably a salesman, you're religious, you're trying to convert her to Scientology, something along those lines. Those are assumptions because that's what happens. Girls never get approached by a guy who wants to hit on them during the day. That's very rare. But they do get approached by people who want to sell them something, or homeless people. So you have to prove that you're not one of those people. So if you go indirect and you ask her, like, where's the nearest Starbucks, she's gonna be a little on edge because she doesn't know what you want from her. That's an uncomfortable feeling. So instead of that, what I highly recommend you do is make a point to approach the girl and tell her why you're there. You can either go somewhat direct by saying something like, hey, I thought you looked interesting and I had to meet you really quick. Or you can go more direct and say, hey, I thought you were cute and I had to say hi. Something along those lines. Those lines, they're fine. They work, they're effective. And yeah, they're good enough. Like there isn't some magical perfect pickup line that you need to have to do day game. Now, if you go direct, first of all, the girl's going to know you're there to hit on her, and that means that you're there to meet her, that you're interested in getting to know her, which she might reject you right away, but a lot of the time that's actually a good thing because if she has a boyfriend, which about half the girls you approach are going to have a boyfriend, well, then she can tell you that right away. She has an incentive to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I actually have a boyfriend. That's actually saving you time, and that's preventing you from getting into a long 30-minute interaction where you talk to this girl, you have a nice conversation, you really make a special connection, and then you ask her for her number, and she says, oh, but you're so nice, but I have a boyfriend. So if you go direct, you're going to avoid getting into that situation most of the time. So if a girl's just totally not interested, there's a 0% chance it's going to happen. If you tell her she's cute, she's going to let you know 0% chance this isn't going to happen. Now, at a more advanced level, you might be able to turn around girls with an indirect approach who would otherwise have been uninterested. Like a girl who has a boyfriend, if you're so charismatic, she might even be like, well, damn, I still want to go on a date with this guy even though I have a boyfriend. But we're talking about very advanced level stuff. And obviously there's an ethical problem, but most of the time, until you're in the top 1% of skill in terms of your game, you're going to get better results by just being direct, and you're going to save yourself a lot of time. You're going to save yourself a lot of time because you're not going to get into 30-minute interactions that are going nowhere. If a girl says thank you and wants to meet you after you make your direct compliment, well, now you can get to work. Basically, now the context of the interaction is that there's a chance something might happen, and you're going to get a lot of very positive reactions. You're going to see that girls like being flirted with, they like being hit on, as long as you're not doing it in some weird aggressive way, that they really appreciate it. It's a positive experience, and that's going to make you more comfortable with making your intentions clear, which is actually one of the biggest reasons guys struggle with game. It's hard for men to make our intentions clear because we have this feeling that it's creepy because that's what society tells us. And it can be creepy, don't get me wrong, if you're too pushy, it can be creepy, but just making your intentions clear in a respectful way, as long as you back off if the girl is not interested, it's a positive experience far more often than it's going to be a negative experience. So doing direct approaches will be good for your internal self-esteem, for your belief in yourself, and for your belief in your own attractiveness. And it will also save you a lot of time, and it will prevent girls from thinking you're some salesman. They'll know why you're there. So direct approach, especially if you're new and you're not experienced, is much better than an indirect approach when it comes to day game. I would highly recommend going direct. The next thing that you should think about is, should you be going for the pull? Now, pulling means you approach a girl, you talk to her for a while, and then you bring her back to your place and you make something happen that very same day. Is it possible to pull from day game? 100%, it's totally possible. I mean, women don't have to be in a club to like the idea of casual sex. I mean, if they're attracted to you and they are just that kind of person that's open-minded to casual sex, which a lot of women are, then yeah, it's totally possible. It's an adventure, it's an experience, it's exciting. A lot of women are down to do that. However, here's the thing. If your intention is to pull a girl, and you're going for the pull, you approach a girl, it's going well, there are several things that have to go right for you to actually pull her. And if any of those things go wrong, that interaction is just going to end up being where you got a number instead of a pull. So, for example, if a girl, she has somewhere to be in an hour, and you spend 45 minutes with her, and then you find out she has somewhere to be, you're not going to be able to pull her, but you still spent 45 minutes talking to her. What does that mean? Well, that means that going for the pull can be very inefficient. And that's just one example. Another example is, what if you approach a girl, and then you find out that she has a boyfriend an hour in? Well, you just spent an hour talking to her, you're going for the pull, but now it turns out you're not going to be able to make that happen. So that's another risk that comes with going for the pull. The third one is, she might just not be down for a one-night stand meeting a guy from the day. That might just be too over the top for her. Like, that's just not relatable for her. So you could get to a point where you're at a restaurant with a girl, you're having this nice conversation, but when it comes to asking her back to your place, she's like, I don't know about that. She's uncomfortable with doing that. So there are several things that can go wrong if you go for the pull, which mean that the chances are very high. If you're going for the pull, you're going to have long 30-minute, 45-minute, 1-hour interactions with the girls you approach. But how often are you actually going to pull them? Unless you already have a good skill set when it comes to game, unless you already have a good idea of how to pull from, say, night game, or you're just naturally good with women, the chances are that 99% of the time, or let's say 95% of the time, you're not going to end up pulling these girls. And then you're going to spend an hour per interaction to get a number, whereas if you were just going for the number, you're just going to say your goal was to talk 5 to 10 minutes to a girl and get her number. Well, if you do that, then in that same hour, you could get 5 to even 10 girls' numbers versus one girl's number. So going for the pull is more epic, right? It's a more exciting experience to go home with a girl that you just met. That's definitely a memory. However, if you're new and you haven't gotten results from Daygame yet, what's going to likely happen if you just start going for the pull is you're going to have a lot of failures. And that's okay. I mean, that's part of the learning process. But because you're only getting like one girl's number per time you go out, it's going to feel like you're not getting any results at all from Daygame. It's going to feel like it's all a waste of time. Whereas if instead you just go to set up dates with as many attractive women as possible, every time you go out, you're going to get multiple girls' numbers. So you're going to feel like you're making progress, and some of those numbers are going to lead to dates. Even if your game is really bad, some of those girls, even really attractive girls, will go on dates with you if you just make the ask. So in the short term, in the first month, 2 months of practicing Daygame, by going for the number, you're going to actually get some dates. And when you're on a date with a girl, all the things that make it hard to pull from Daygame are easier during a date. Because during a date, she already has set aside time for you. You know she's probably attracted to you and that she's probably single, or she wouldn't have gone on a date with you. And going home with a guy from a date is much more socially acceptable than just after meeting them. So the cards are much more in your favor. And I mean, you couldn't be using that date to approach other women anyway. Whereas if you're in a Daygame session, you could use that time to meet a bunch of different women instead of investing it all into one. So going for, and I know this section might not be the most exciting, but it's actually very important in terms of your results. It can easily 10x the results you get from Daygame if you heed this advice. When you're new, Don't go for the poll, go for numbers and go for the poll from your dates. You will get a lot more results. Don't even, if you're going for the number, you don't need to talk to a girl for 30 minutes to get her number. If you talk to her for 5 to 10 minutes and there's a decent chemistry, you make a good impression, that's enough time for her to know she wants to go on a date with you. It might slightly increase it if you have a longer interaction, but overall, in an hour, having 10 different interactions with different girls is going to be more likely to lead to dates than having one very long interaction. And if you're not very experienced with game, the longer interactions, you might actually reveal some of your insecurities, or you might make mistakes that will make girls who were interested less interested. Whereas if you just make a 1-minute approach where you just confidently say, hey, let's go on a date, you don't have room to make those kinds of mistakes. So overall, I would say 5 to 10 minutes is ideal. Each approach, get as many numbers as possible. And then when you're good at that, when you're getting consistent results, where you're getting dates consistently by doing that, then you can take things to the next level and start going for the poll. But don't do that until you're getting good results by getting numbers. So that's like the next level that you do once you're already getting results. But if you start with that, you're very likely to end up disappointed and to start feeling like Daygame doesn't work. I've seen this happen a lot of times with people I was coaching. That was their mindset, or people that I've met. And that's a very important thing to avoid. If you avoid that, your results will be far better, and you'll see just how amazing the possible results that you can get from Daygame are, even if you're a newbie, even if you're someone who doesn't really know what you're doing, you're not, super smooth with women yet, you can still get really good results if you just go for a lot of numbers. How do you actually approach? So what I mean is, I already gave you a couple lines that are effective lines to use, but how do you actually approach in terms of, let's say a girl is walking by, she's walking the same direction you're walking, you see her, how would you approach her? What you want to do is walk quickly or even jog, but give her space. So get a little bit in front of her and to the side, and then make eye contact when you're in front of her, and you give her like at least say 5 feet of space to the side and a few feet in front of her. Make eye contact, get her to acknowledge you, and if she's on headphones or something, you might have to tap her shoulder gently, but make sure you do it in a very non-threatening way, and or you can just speak, hey, 1 second, and then she'll hear your voice if you talk loud enough, even if she's got headphones on, and then just gesture, take off your headphones. Because headphones is something a lot of guys are like, well, there's no way to approach if she's on headphones. She's just listening to music. I don't think, I've almost never had an experience where a girl's like, oh, I was listening to music, why are you trying to talk to me? The vast majority of girls will be fine talking to you even if they were listening to music. So getting rid of the headphones, just make a gesture like this to take the headphones off after you already have her attention, having made eye contact with her. So what you want to do is make sure that you get in front of her. If she's walking the same direction, get in front of her and make eye contact. What 90 to 95% of guys who are practicing Daygame do is they don't get in front of the girl and they freak her out. They scare her, they frighten her. And a lot of the times you could recover that, but obviously it's not ideal, because if you approach and you're behind her and you're like, hey, she's gonna freak. She's like, what the fuck is going on? It's scary, right? It's a frightening situation, and then you can maybe calm it down and still make it work. But it's much better to avoid that by just getting in front of her, making eye contact, and then saying something like, hey, getting her attention. And once she's making eye contact with you, then you launch into the actual opener. Then you start saying, hey, I thought you were cute and I just had to say hi, or whatever.
Hey, I know this is random, but I thought you were cute. I wanted to say hi. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Avery. Nice to meet you.
So that's what you do if you're walking in the same direction. If she's sitting down, that's the simplest. That's very easy. If she's sitting down, she's probably on her laptop or reading or something along those lines. All you have to do is approach her, then launch into the same opener that you would otherwise. And if she's giving you attention, if she's reciprocating, like asking you questions, paying attention to you, then you can sit down, ask, hey, could I sit down? And then you can continue from there. If she's not giving you her attention, like she keeps looking back at her computer, she goes back to her book or whatever, that means she's not really interested. And so just say, have a nice day. But that's all you have to do when the girl's sitting down. It's actually quite simple. The only thing is at some point you want to make sure to ask if you can sit down with her. Oh, and one more thing. So if the girl's walking and you're walking the same direction, if she slows down when you go for the approach, then you can stop and she will probably stop as well. However, if she keeps moving at the same speed, then walk with her for a while, as long as she's reciprocating, as long as she's, engaging in the conversation. But then after she seems to be invested, after she's really engaged in the conversation, at some point you want to stop her. At some point you want to say, hey, let's stop for a second. I have to go the other direction, or whatever. Hey, can we stop a second? I don't want to just follow you that way forever. And by doing that, you're going to be able to have a more intimate conversation, because you're able to lock eyes, you're able to be face to face as opposed to walking next to each other. So you do want to do that at some point, but you don't have to stop her right at the beginning. If she doesn't want to stop at the beginning because she's in a hurry to get somewhere, she's not really sure if she's into whatever's happening, she's like, I don't know. Then basically you're putting a lot of pressure on her and you're becoming an obstacle. And even if she does stop, part of her is thinking, I don't know if I want to, why is this guy forcing me to stop, right? If she didn't want to stop and you're pushing the stop, there's a part of her that's like, I don't know. And that tension will likely build to the point where she's like, okay, I gotta go, have a nice day. Whereas if you go with her, you're not an obstacle to whatever her goal is, wherever she's trying to go. So that's it's a more win-win kind of situation. So go for the stop, but not until she's really engaged with the conversation. All right, so that's if a girl's sitting down, that's if a girl's walking. What if she's walking towards you? What you want to do is basically make eye contact with her and say hey as you're walking in the same direction, and stop in front of her. And if she stops as well, then you can start the conversation that way. However, if she keeps walking, then turn around with her and try to be a little bit in front of her, not following her. But if you notice, okay, she's walking this way, you're here, and she doesn't stop, she's still walking, just turn around and walk with her. So, hey, I just want to say I thought you were cute. And if you don't, like if you miss the window of opportunity and she walks past you, that's fine. Just do, then she's walking the same direction as you now, right? She passed you. Then you can just do the same type of approach as the first version, right? Then now it's the same as the one from before where you're both walking the same direction. So that's fine. But that's the ideal way to go about it. If you miss your opportunity and she's already passed you, then just walk past her and approach her that way. And other than that, it's pretty much the same. That's the only difference, is that see if she'll stop when you stop and say hey while she's walking towards you, and if she won't, just walk the same direction with her, but make sure not to follow her. Be 1 to 2 feet in front of her so that she can see you and know where you are, instead of having this like presence behind her that she doesn't really know what it is, because that's going to be uncomfortable for the girl. And anything you do that makes her uncomfortable, it's going to lower your chances. And there's no reason to want to make people uncomfortable anyway. There's no advantage to it. Despite what society standards say, Daygame can be a very win-win experience where you're making people feel good about themselves, you're expressing your personality, meeting new people, having an adventure, and brightening people's days, adding something new to it, as long as you do it in a way that's respectful, as long as you do it in a way where you're not like unnecessarily aggressive, which is something a lot of pickup coaches in the past have taught. Like, no matter what she does, keep plowing. It's a waste of time. If the girl's giving you a lot of red lights, like she doesn't seem to want to talk to you, just move on to the next girl. The chances are so low that you're going to turn it around that it's not worth it anyway. It's just your ego, like, I have to prove myself. It's not going to happen. So it's rarely worth it. And you're going to, give people a negative experience. Why do that, right? So now that's what if you have 2 girls? If you have 2 girls, you approach the same way, except you want to make sure that you acknowledge both girls. If you only acknowledge the girl that you're attracted to, the other girl's likely to get jealous. The only way that you can get away with that is if you just approach really quickly, say, hey, I thought you were cute. I don't want to, bother you guys. Would you like to get coffee sometime? To the girl you like, and just make it quick and get out. However, her friend is probably not going to be on her team, so you're not going to want to stay around if you do that. The other way you can go about it is acknowledge both of them, approach them, and say something like, hey, I thought you guys looked interesting, and I had to meet you really quick. As long as they respond positively, then you can start a conversation with them. But just make sure that you make stronger eye contact, that you are more sexual, more flirty with the girl you like, not with the other girl, because let's say there's a girl that gets hit on all the time and there's a girl that doesn't get hit on so much. If the girl that gets hit on all the time gets the sense that her friend is being hit on, she's gonna be like, you know what? Even though I like this guy, this is her turn. This one's for her. And then you're likely to miss your chance with the girl you like and only have the opportunity with the girl that you weren't attracted to, which is not what you want. So be more flirtatious with the girl you like, and then at the end, you can ask them both for their numbers just to be polite, or just ask the girl you like. Either one. I mean, it's not the ideal situation if there's two girls, because there's automatically a little bit of jealousy on the other girl's part. But if the girl liked you, and even though her friend's a little jealous, she's still likely to go on a date with you later. So you can just get her number, and the same way you would if she was alone. The main difference is that because there's two girls, you're probably not going to be able to go for the pull. That's probably not an option. But other than that, unless you can go for the threesome, which is definitely possible in some circumstances. But other than that, it's pretty much the same as approaching one girl by yourself, except you're just engaging the other person and not ignoring, not like leaving her to feel like, well, fuck this guy, he's just hitting on my friend and giving me no attention. But why would she want that? If you do that, she's going to become an obstacle to you and try to get rid of you. She's going to cock block you, right? So avoid that. Then what if you have a group of 3 or more girls? Basically the same situation. Hey, I thought you guys looked interesting. You can just approach the girl that you're interested in and give the rest of the group less attention though. Because it's a bigger group, they can just talk to each other. If you're talking to one girl, the rest, they might kind of pay attention to what's happening because it's interesting, but you don't need to involve them all in the conversation as much. You can focus most of your attention on the one girl you like, but you do want to acknowledge all of the friends, so that you're not this guy who's just like trying to, I don't know, like a predator, like a lion, like trying to take one of the gazelles and ignoring the rest. That's not the vibe you want to have, right? So make sure that you approach all of them. Make sure that you engage all of them at least a little bit, but you can spend 80% of your attention on the girl you actually like. Chances are this isn't going to be longer than 5 to 10 minutes because the whole group at a certain point, unless it's a situation where they're going to a club or something, the group as a whole is probably not going to want you to stay forever. But you can still talk 5 to 10 minutes, get the girl you like's number, and hang out with her later. Now, what if it's a girl with a guy? This situation, I usually won't approach if there's a girl with a guy because, the chances of it going well are much lower than other situations. The guy is probably not going to be on your team. However, let's say you're in a situation where there aren't a lot of women to approach. In that case, approaching a girl who's by herself might actually be, or approaching a girl who's with a guy might actually be the right course of action because it's better to talk to them than no one. If you see a girl who's like your dream girl and she's with a guy, because you're just so you have so much attraction for her, you should still approach. Like that's a rule I have to myself. If I see a girl that like on a scale or whatever is a 9 or a 10, a girl that I just consider like unusually stunning, I have to approach her even if the situation is not ideal. If she's with a guy, what I do is I just go in direct. I approach direct, and that's kind of confusing. No, I approach her directly and I say, hey, I thought you were cute. I just say hi, but how do you guys know each other? To find out if it's her boyfriend. And if she's like, dude, I'm her boyfriend. It's like, well, you can understand why I find her attractive. It's, lucky man or whatever, right? Just compliment him on his good taste or whatever, on, lucky you. And he'll most likely be flattered. She'll be flattered. It might be a little tense or a little awkward, but it's not like you're going to get into a fight or anything. However, if they're not a couple, it's actually, if they're not together, the fact that you approached a girl who's with a guy, it just makes you come across as really, really confident It shows that you just really don't give a fuck. Like, who does that? Almost no one does that. So that automatically just makes you come across as more attractive. The fact that you were able to do that, you're probably not going to have a long interaction with this girl and this guy, but even if you get her number within a minute, right away, and you say, all right, it's nice meeting you guys, she's going to remember that, right? That's going to be something she's going to tell her friends about. Like, this guy just, while I was with my friend Pat, he didn't give a fuck. Like, she's going to have a memory of that, and so the chances that that will lead to a date are fairly high, just because it's so striking and it shows so much confidence. So a lot of the time they will be a couple, and obviously it's not gonna go anywhere, but some of the time it's not going to be a couple, and in those situations it's actually pretty much ideal for you. So that's what to do if it's a girl and a guy. Those are pretty much all the most important situations in Daygame when it comes to approaching. The next thing you want to think about is how to keep the conversation going. So after you've said your opener, how do you keep the conversation going past that to the point that you've made a connection, that you've made an emotional connection with the girl? So let's say you say, hey, I thought you were cute and I had to say hi. And she's like, oh, thank you. Well, what do you do next? Well, in an ideal world, you'll be in a creative flow state to where you can just think of something off the top of your head. That's ideal, but you can't rely on that. Some of the time, you're gonna be in your head, you're gonna be a little choppy, and you're not gonna be able to think of anything off the top of your head. And in those situations, what you wanna do is have some basic questions memorized. So what are some examples? A few examples include, are you from here? What do you do for work? What do you study? What do you do for fun? Things like that. Basic getting to know you questions that anyone would ask someone they're just meeting. It's a good way to break the ice, and it's a good way to create an opportunity for a conversation to start. Because when you ask a girl where she's from, if she says she's from somewhere that you visited or that you're familiar with, you can start a conversation that's interesting about that topic. It opens the doors for conversation, right? If she says she's from California, you can ask something like, okay, I'm curious, how are the guys different in California than they are here? Like what is the dating scene? How is it different? And she might start saying, well, there it's like all about these one night stands, and then you've already gotten a somewhat interesting conversation going, starting off something very basic and boring. But if you just launch into some like very sexual or provocative question right from the beginning, she's gonna have trouble relating to it. So generally, you ask basic questions like what she does for a living, and then you go deeper from there, right? That's how a conversation organically develops. You free associate off her answer. So if she says she's a nurse, you can ask her more about what nursing is like, and then you can go deeper in the conversation into the topic of nursing. What's possible is basically limitless, right? So have 4 or 5 basic questions just memorize that you can ask any girl, and that's enough, right? If you have a 2-3 minute conversation, even if it's a little bit boring, you ask the girl's number after that, and some girls they just liked you, right? You just had good chemistry, and even though the conversation wasn't very interesting, they're still gonna be down to go on a date with you. So you don't need to be Russell Brand or Craig Ferguson, right? You don't need to be James Bond level smooth. If you have a very surface level basic conversation, a lot of the time that's good enough, especially if your eye contact is strong, your vocal tonality comes across as confident, your body language is good. If all those things are dialed in, even a very boring conversation can be very emotionally stimulating. Even something that's very surface level can get her very engaged if you have that piercing eye contact where you're giving her this like flirtatious sexual look. So that is something you want to get better with over time, but you naturally will. At first, you might struggle to think of anything when you do an approach because you're just in your head, you're like overthinking, there's some nerves. But after you do 3, 4, 5 approaches, or after you've been approaching for 2, 3, 4 weeks, you'll start to be able to naturally think of interesting things to say. So you don't need a script. All you need is a few basic questions, trust your instincts, and then as you do more approaches, it'll start to be, because if you're talking with friends, someone you've known for a long time, or you're talking with family, do you have trouble thinking of interesting things to say? Probably not. That comes very easy to you when you're comfortable with the situation. Why it's so hard to think of things to say is because of the nerves. is because of that, like, ooh, this is a hot girl, I don't want to mess it up. So the more you approach attractive girls, the less that will block you, and the more you will be just as charismatic or just as free-flowing and creative as you are when you're talking with your friends. Now, if even with your friends, you're really not creative or free-flowing or funny, you don't have those traits even in those situations, I would recommend practicing free association exercises. I have some in the 5 Pillars of Game that you can check out, like specific exercises you can do 2 minutes a day, and also watching comedy. Watch comedy shows, watch comedy specials, and by watching those, you'll get an idea of watch those from an analytical perspective. Try to think, like, what is making this funny? What makes this entertaining? And you'll basically get an understanding on a subconscious level of how to be interesting, how to be funny, if you just watch a lot of those. So replace whatever shows you normally watch, whatever YouTube you normally watch, replace that with comedy specials and with, comedy shows like Community, for example, or Arrested Development, any show that's witty. Watch those shows and you'll start to pick up on their wittiness, like almost through osmosis. Over time, you will, because humor is unconscious. You can't force it. It's not conscious. It's not something that, if someone tells you, make me laugh, you're not going to be able to think of anything funny because it's become something that you're forcing. Whenever you think of something funny, it just comes up organically. It comes up unconsciously. And you can train that muscle by doing more approaches and getting more comfortable with women, and also by watching other people who are funny and basically modeling them unconsciously. You'll just start to unconsciously pick up the formulas that they use, and then you'll just start saying funny things without having to think about it. So in terms of how to keep the conversation going, that's all you really need to know. Over time, if you ask more emotional questions, if you talk about things that are more personal with more charge, things that are a little bit controversial or edgy, like say spirituality, that will make the conversations, that'll make the girls have a stronger impression of you, and that's better. But you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to do that perfectly, and that's something that through experience you will automatically get better at. Through just doing more and more approaches, you will develop an unconscious ability to just come up with interesting things to say. You won't have to think about it because you won't be in your head, you won't be nervous, you won't have that blockage. So it's something that you don't need to memorize a bunch of like pickup tactics to do. Building momentum. This is something that goes along with the last point of how to think of interesting things to say. But momentum is, and it's also something known as God mode, but momentum is when you do an approach, when you do a bunch of approaches consecutively, over time, a momentum starts to build and you start to get into this state where your ego, the part of you that's criticizing yourself, the part of you that's normally thinking all the reasons you're not good enough, or that's filtering your thoughts and filtering what you say because you feel self-conscious, that part of your brain will shut off if you do enough approaches. So if you do approach, at a certain point, the thinking part of your brain will shut off and you will just get into the zone. And this is one of the most powerful things you can do. So I have entire videos about, I'll link a video below about how to build social momentum. But the most important thing is to, when you get out of an approach, don't wait 30 minutes to do another approach. The next girl you see, approach her, talk to her. Even if you're not attracted to her, talk to her, just give her a compliment about her style, or tell her that you thought she looked interesting, and have a short conversation with her. Because first of all, you're offering value, you're making her day better, and that's also gonna make you feel better, because when you give good emotions, you also reciprocate that automatically gets reciprocated to you. But then also, you're getting into a better emotional state, and you're getting into a point where you're not overthinking, so the next approach will automatically be smoother. And if you do this throughout the course of a day, by the 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th, 20th approach, you'll get into a state where it's completely effortless and you don't even have to think about it. And like, if you've never done more than 5 approaches on a game session, do that. The next time you go out, do 10 approaches, do 15 approaches, and it will radically change how you think about game. It'll radically change what you think is possible, And the results you get on that day might be better than a lot of guys' results are in the course of an entire month of going out. So it's very powerful. I'll have a link below so you can learn more about how to build social momentum. I have a complete chapter of that in the 5 Pillars of Game. I have a 28-minute video about the complete breakdown about how to get into social momentum. But for now, like if you just want for the basics, because I'm not going to go into that for 30 minutes, but the basics is do as many approaches as possible. Approach anyone, even if you're not attracted to them. Don't stay in a long interaction, but just talk to a girl that you're not attracted to for a minute or two. May offer value and keep doing that. And if you get rejected, don't judge yourself while you're out. Don't criticize yourself while you're out. Criticize yourself after you're back home. Write a field report, then you can criticize yourself. But while you're out, just think positive thoughts. Just think, that was 1,000 out of 10 because I approached. That's all you want to think. You want to get yourself into a good state. You want to make it so rejection makes your mood better, not worse. And if you get to that point, you're doing something very right. And I can honestly say that most of the time when I go out, my rejections improve my mood more than they make my mood worse. I'm not saying rejection never affects me, it never gets to me. Of course, sometimes it does. But more often than not, when I get rejected, my mood improves rather than getting worse. And that's a point that you want to get to. That's pretty much everything you need to know about Daygame. The last thing is to follow up on your leads. It's very common that a guy will get a few girls' numbers when going out and approaching, but he just doesn't follow up on any of them. He doesn't ask them out on dates. So if you're struggling to follow up on your leads, or if you're just not following up on your leads consistently, I mean, obviously, if you get a girl's number and you're not attracted to her, well, you don't need to follow up, right? That's fair enough. But if you're not following up even when you're attracted to the girl, what you should do, and I know it might sound a little weird, but what you should do is make a spreadsheet with each of the girl's numbers that you liked, right? Each girl that you want to follow up with, and then create a spreadsheet and then say, did I ask her on a date? And make sure that you get a yes for each of them. And you can ask them on a date quite simply by doing something like, hey, what are you doing on Sunday evening, for example, or when are you free this week? That's fine, but make sure that you ask each of these girls out on a date. Any girl that you're attracted to and you get her number, add that to a spreadsheet if you have to make sure that you're actually getting the value from your numbers, because it happens so often where a guy will get a bunch of girls' numbers, but he doesn't follow up on them, and then what's the point, right? So make sure, if you're not following up, literally make a spreadsheet to force yourself to follow up. That's what, when it comes to sales, when it comes to coaching clients, I have a spreadsheet to make sure I follow up, because if I just rely on my habits, I'm going to let a lot of those fall through. It's just a way to make it a habit, to make it something automatic that you can't neglect, that you can't procrastinate on doing, because it's very easy to procrastinate. And then one thing that I did neglect earlier is closing. So when it comes to getting the girl's number, what is the best way to do that? The best way is when you're talking to a girl, just say something like, hey, it's actually been really cool meeting you. I have to go, but we should hang out again sometime, or we should get coffee sometime. And if she says yes, don't just get her number. Say, when are you free this week? Or are you free Sunday evening? Either one of those. So when are you free this week? And if she says, oh, I'm free on Saturday, or I'm free anytime this weekend, then you make specific plans from that. Then you say, okay, you free on Thursday evening? Let's go to Starbucks Thursday evening and let's get coffee, right? Make very specific plans with her after you get her number. Don't just get her number and then say, let's get coffee sometime, because that's pretty vague and it's very easy for that to turn into a flake. But if you make specific plans while you're in front of the girl, specific plans to say, go to Starbucks at 7 p.m. on Thursday, and you specify a location, then that's much more likely to end up turning into a date. There's a much lower chance of getting flaked if you do that. So I highly recommend that when you get girls' numbers, you make a point to set specific plans like I just said. And if you do that, you will get just so many less flakes, and your experience is going to be a lot more positive of Daygame. If you want to learn more about that, there's something called Suasion by Robert Cialdini. He's a psychologist. It's an entire book that talks about why getting people to commit to something beforehand makes them more likely to actually follow through on it. So there's a lot of psychological research that has shown when people make a verbal commitment to do something, they're 20% more likely to follow through on those plans than if you just have vague plans to get, say, coffee sometime. So that's the best way to go for the close. And yeah, so that's pretty much everything you need to know about Daygame. I go into a little bit more detail in my upcoming book, The Method. This is based on the Complete Guide to Daygame chapter. It's basically a video version that's more condensed. But if you want to learn more about how to be successful in Daygame, make sure to check that out once I release it. But yeah, I hope you found this video useful. If you want me to do more videos like this where I just cover a complete topic and just go through exactly a step-by-step system for getting results, in a longer video that's more like 30, 40, 50 minutes as opposed to 5-10 minute videos. If you like this type of video, make sure to let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button, because if you don't hit the bell button, you will not be notified when I release a new video. And the last thing that I want to mention is that if you're interested in taking a boot camp with me, where you get coaching with me personally, if you're someone who hasn't been going out, you haven't been taking action, but you've been watching videos like this, and you just want that, you want to be forced to take action. You want to get a lot of momentum instantly, and you've just been procrastinating, you've been putting it off for too long, then make sure to click the link below to schedule a free call with me so we can find out if a boot camp is a good fit for you. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and have a good one.